Well, it doesn't matter now.
Well, I want to make sure it doesn't, like, there's not a big
This
audio
whole
signature.
part's probably going to get clipped out.
Maybe.
Or it's going to be your cold opening.
Shut up. I think that's it right there, actually. Somebody's going to... You're cold open. All right.
Welcome back to something interesting. Last week, we talked about the Nobel Prize, going to school, and we gave our suggestions for YouTube and podcasts. Antonio, do you have any follow-up?
Well, I do want to start with the suggestions that we did, listing them off.
Mm-hmm.
We're never going to do that again. That made it hell to do show notes on, and it was
That's true.
kind of...
That was terrible.
That was boring.
I wish that didn't happen. Last week, I brought up YouTuber Ed Pratt. He is unicycling across the world, around the world, rather.
Where was he last time?
He was in Australia, and recently he made it all the way across Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So something I didn't mention in last episode was that the reason he's doing this is for charity,
Mm-hmm.
which I think he doesn't really put it in his videos until like the very end sometimes. So
Why?
I just think it's an interesting thing. This is a kind of a neat way to like get word about a charity, spread it. So I just thought that's cool.
We'll link it down in the little show notes down there.
In the description. He made it all the way across Australia. Then he got on a boat, and he's now in New Zealand, headed up New Zealand.
That's it?
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. He's going to New Zealand right now. That's
he
his
is
plan.
in New Zealand currently.
In New Zealand?
Yes.
Going across?
It took him 89 days, 3,000 miles to get all the way across Australia.
So does he do a video like every day about it, or
He doesn't do a video every day because not every day he can make a video. He doesn't have Wi-Fi all the time to upload it. So he'll have like a few days of filming, and then when he gets to like a city or something, he'll stop. He usually finds someone to stay with in a city. He'll edit his video, upload it there.
What are these videos about? Like,
so it's just him, the problems that he encounters while unicycling. Like he was going through China following his GPS. And he reached a tunnel that was closed. So there was this whole section of him walking his unicycle through the muddiest, most nasty cow path of a road. And it was just about how he could find a different way around it. And it's just him unicycling. He does different things. Like he does talks at schools and things on occasion. Because like he stays with people and like their kids and stuff, so he like works out deals. People will contact him.
I was gonna say, does he get it from people like that?
Like people will see his videos and be like, "Hey, when you get to this city that I live in, that I know you plan on going to, you can stay with me."
Did he go across America yet, or is that?
He's not across America yet. No.
Okay, is he gonna? So he plans on doing across America.
I would guess because that's kind of like an entire hemisphere.
That is true.
Yeah, my guess is he's not gonna go North America, down South America, and out. He'll probably just go straight across.
Well, yeah,
because like. That's a long way.
Is it more or less going across around the whole world, or going across almost every country or continent? Do you know?
Seems like he's trying to go around the world completely, but like I think he wanted to make a stop in all the continents, so he might end up doing South America.
Well, yeah, because I was
requires
thinking
some backtracking.
I would think if it was around the world, it would go Europe through to Russia and Asia, and then
Alaska and over.
You go to Alaska and over, or you could just take a boat right over to Americas, go to that, and work your way around that way. But I think he's going to as many continents as he possibly can. I don't know. I have not watched his videos yet.
No.
That's what I'll do tonight.
Yeah.
I got something to watch now.
Last thing to follow up on.
Did you find anything else about that Nobel Prize? Of like why it was split up that way?
So the Nobel Prize was on the discovery of what we predicted would be gravitational waves. So what happened is there were two separate, like, companies isn't really the word that I want to use for it, but there were like two companies, one of which was headed by these two guys. The other was headed by a single guy.
Right.
So it got split up accordingly. Yeah. I still feel like it could have been split into thirds.
I was thinking about that afterwards. It's like sort of a project thing at school.
Yeah.
If you have a project of one kid doing one thing and then another project, but two kids are doing that, those two kids get the same grade while the one kid gets one grade because they're both doing the same amount of work. But the other group clearly has an advantage. I say in quotes, but I don't know.
All right, this week.
I'm hoping, can you tell me something interesting?
Oh, man. Actually, I think that you should follow, or you should start this week's new topic.
All right. Ever heard of the ship of Theseus?
I've not.
You really?
Really?
The ship of Theseus paradox?
No.
Okay. So this sort of it brought to my attention something. So the paradox is technically is a Roman ship is going from one port to one port.
Mm-hmm.
Along the way, the boat starts to break down, so they replace the wood. The beams start to break, they replace the beams. The sail starts to break, they replace the sail. By the time they get to the second port, well, is it still the same boat? Everything's been replaced, but is it still the same boat? They said that was a paradox. I personally don't think it is whatsoever.
You don't think it's a paradox?
No.
Why not?
Because I think it has a definite answer.
All right.
No, it is not the same. It is the embodiment of what you had before.
All right.
Such as if you had an X for 10 years and you said, oh, I've had an X for 10 years, but I've replaced the handle 3 times and I have replaced the head twice. Well, then that's not the same X. It's the embodiment of what you had bought before, but after that, it's not the same.
Okay.
And I wanted to get your opinion on that.
What I think about this, me going to school for biology, right? Mm-hmm. It's what I do. It's on an everyday basis. I'm always thinking about these things.
Yeah.
I knew of this paradox, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know the name for it, so you brought it up to me. But as you started to explain it, it made sense in my head.
Yeah,
and recently, I've been thinking a lot about this, right? So initially, when you're conceived, so sperm cell meets egg cell, they combine. They are one cell at that point. Mm-hmm. That cell then divides into 2 cells, which divide into 4 cells, 16, 32, 64, so on. Eventually, you end up making a whole small human, right?
Generally.
Yeah. But cells only are alive for a certain amount of time, right?
Right.
So originally, that cell that you start off with will eventually no longer exist. Mm-hmm. So the thing that started off as you doesn't exist anymore.
Isn't it like every 7 years, every cell in your body is...
Every
changed?
7 years, every single cell in your body is dead.
Right. And a new one has...
Yeah, a new one's taken its place. It's not like at the 7-year mark, all your cells die. It's a gradual process.
Right.
So you, 7 years ago versus now, are you the same person or are you something different completely?
Now, that's weird because at a biological standpoint...
You're completely... Every atom in your body... Well... You can't say that, but pretty much every atom in your body is a different atom.
Right. Now, when you put it into that, when you said biology, I was like, he's going to bring up the fact that we are...
But then we get into the point of what makes you, you.
Yes.
So,
for inanimate objects, it's much easier to say that this is not the same thing. It is obviously made of new things and could, like I said, the embodiment. But as a human...
What makes you, is it your consciousness that makes you the person that you are? Or is it the physical representation of you? All of the cells and everything that make you up?
What do you think?
So what I think is that what makes you is your consciousness. However consciousness works, which I think consciousness exists on a physical level. Mm-hmm. So it's like, there's certain things, chemical reactions, electrical signals that happen in your brain that give you self-awareness. Whether or not that self-awareness continues past your body's half-life, I don't know. But in the time of living, I feel like that's what consciousness is. It exists on a physical level.
It is a string of chemical reactions, essentially.
Because that's what it is. Like if you have an emotional reaction to something, it's because your brain is producing certain chemicals as a reaction to stimuli in your environment.
Right.
So like you being a young man,
as I am,
walking down the street, you see an attractive young lady, right?
Oh.
Your brain starts producing certain chemicals that tell you she's attractive. It gives you an emotion of attraction towards this person. So what I think
if you're applying that logic to consciousness, they're essentially the same thing. They're the
same thing, right? But so you now versus what you were a year ago, right? You have a whole year of experiences past that. Every vacation that you've been on in that past year shapes who you are today. So you, 7 years ago, let's say you went on a vacation to Europe.
Okay.
That person 7 years ago, they hadn't yet been to Europe. That person has never actually seen it. Maybe they've seen pictures, but they've never been there. They haven't eaten the food there. They didn't experience the plane ride there. You today have. So are you and you 7 years ago the same person? You have different experiences. Specific parts of your body have changed.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you're not
the same person.
No.
Whatsoever. With everything that you've gained over
Mm-hmm.
whatever you've gained,
I feel like,
and what's become new has
yes.
made you a new person.
Yeah.
So to speak.
You and that person are similar, but I don't think that you and that person are the same.
Right. I can see that.
Mm-hmm. But then the other thing, your consciousness, even though I feel like it exists on a physical level, your consciousness can break.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you get knocked out, you go unconscious,
mm-hmm.
or you sleep. So you like to think as you 7 years ago to you to now, all your memories, everything that happened is a continuous stream of consciousness, but there's breaks in between each day, every time you take a nap. Are you the same person when you wake up as when you went to sleep if consciousness stopped during that time?
I hate this question.
Uh-huh.
I hate it because a part of me always would say, yes, I remember going to sleep and I remember waking up.
Yes.
But if it was sort of this break in consciousness, who's to say you haven't changed completely and you just have the memories as before?
Yes. This brings up a really interesting topic. It's like a belief called last thursdayism.
Oh my God.
So it's that the universe, all your memories, everything was created last Thursday into the state of what last Thursday was. Mm-hmm. So every atom, every particle subatomically just was brought into existence in its exact location to give you the certain makeup of your brain to give you these memories. And it just happened last Thursday. How do you know that not every time you wake up, you're in a new life with a new set of memories?
What is the word I'm trying to think of that? Something that is unprovable. Like, there's a certain phrase. I do not know. But it's this whole situation. And I'd like to think that
the
is not
egocentric predicament. The egocentric predicament is
maybe.
So you can't prove anything exists out of what's inside your own head. That's all you know for sure. Because that's the only thing that you have direct access to. You can have a conversation with someone. They can tell you they're real. They can say that they've had memories. Mm-hmm. But you don't know for certain this person has the same consciousness that you know you have. Because you don't have access to their consciousness.
Right. God. You know, what is there to even say about that?
Mm-hmm. If you died, which is a break in consciousness, but also a break in body functions, and you're brought back to life.
Are you the same person?
Are you the same person? It's the same as if you go to sleep.
I think at that point, the whole sleeping thing is tough to say. Mm-hmm. But then saying if you died and then came back to life, that brings into my point,
I'm not talking about like you're legally dead for like 57 seconds or something like that. I'm saying you're
dead. You have died.
Dead.
And
then something, for some reason, you're brought back to life. Mm-hmm. Are you the same person as you were before you died? Or, because I almost said right then, a past life. Mm-hmm. Is that a different life that somebody else lived? Or is that still part of your life? Is being dead part of life?
Consciousness, whenever I think about it, always brings into a sense a thought of a soul of some sort. And when you bring that into it, being dead and then coming back to life, that always like kind of, it screws with my head a bit. Yeah. And I always wondered if when you died, is your consciousness a separate being? Is it an energy that cannot be destroyed, that then goes off into the world. What happens to this thing?
Yes.
Because from our perspective, it seems that what we have is special. You could say it's special, but then there's how do we know that other animals do not have this consciousness or some sort of variation of this consciousness? And when they die or we kill them, how is that not as inhumane as killing another human?
Yes.
Or things like that.
Here is an idea.
Okay.
Something interesting to think about.
Interesting.
What if...
I'm going to do a little ding every time we say something interesting.
Let's start a counter. Put it in the description. Every time we say something interesting, the number of times gets put in the description of every show.
I like it.
Here's something interesting.
Okay.
Ding. What if, upon your death, the consciousness that you experience, if your consciousness exists as a form of energy, it has no physical limits on it.
Right.
It's only an energy. You can now travel at the speed of light.
Right. You are an energy brought out into this
world.
At
the speed of light.
Not constrained by anything. That is my ideal form of afterlife, in my opinion, is just your energy. Like if consciousness is an energy, that it just goes off into the world.
Yep.
That to me seems like the most logical thing of any sort of afterlife.
So, what if this energy that now exists only in it's a massless state. It's not bound to any physical limits other than the maximum speed at which it can travel.
Correct.
Light will always take the shortest path, traveling at its maximum speed. In a vacuum, traveling 2.99 times 10 to the 8th
there we go.
meters per second, that light can travel. At the speed of light, time doesn't pass for you. Because we measure time based on how quickly things seem to happen. So the faster you go, the slower time gets.
Right.
And eventually, it will just stop for you.
At the speed of light?
At the speed of light. Because nothing can happen. It's like if you and somebody else are traveling at the speed of light, they turn on a laser pointer. The light will never leave the laser pointer and reach you. It's frozen in time. It's not moving at all. They can't even create movement because time isn't passing for them. What if all time exists not as a linear progression, but it exists as one physical thing? You become a four-dimensional consciousness.
Right. 4 dimensions.
So all of time exists at once for you.
Okay. I like that idea. It's very, very, very different. I never actually heard about that. That time stops at the speed of light. Didn't know that actually. But I thought about this as you were talking. It's your consciousness is one thing, but are your memories and your consciousness linked to each other?
See, what I think,
if this energy, this hypothetical energy, was released into the world, would they be attached to any sort of resemblance of what you thought of yourself?
I don't think so.
No?
No, because your memories are stored in the way your brain is physically laid out.
Right. That's why our memories they're not, you don't remember everything.
Yeah.
In a sense, because it's still bound by physical limits.
Exactly. So, as a consciousness, I feel like your consciousness is just using information from your brain to interact with other things also brought to your consciousness by your brain. So with existing in 4 dimensions, with all of time existing at once, you have direct access as a consciousness to all things that will ever happen.
Right. So when you're leaving your body, you have no sense of self. You're just some sort of energy. Okay, but then that makes me wonder, like, how could you ever experience then experience
That's
anything.
the issue.
Because I feel like when you think about this, you think of yourself as and what you see and what you think going out into this world now, but that's not quite it. That couldn't possibly be it. So would it then just be back into a state of darkness, of nothingness?
Well, this is the problem. Where we exist as three-dimensional beings, we have an X, Y, and a Z of location. Yep. The corner at which they meet is a point on time, right? So as a three-dimensional being, you can't have a comprehension of what it's like to exist as a four-dimensional being. Because then you exist at every point along the scale of time.
Right. Okay.
So you can't even formulate an idea about what it would be like to exist in 4 dimensions.
No, you cannot. It's one of those things when you think about death, your brain literally cannot think of anything.
Because it's why think about like if people are scared of death because they don't know what is there.
Right.
They don't know what's gonna happen.
We're all scared of the unknown.
Even if you're a religious person and it's like you believe there's something else, you're scared of dying. It's kind of like an evolutionary thing, but something that I think about just purely from like an analytical standpoint, like if there isn't an afterlife, do you remember what it's like before you were born?
Yeah,
that's what death is.
That's what I thought. Brought back to the state you were before you were born.
Another thought about the afterlife: what if, as a 4-dimensional being now, you have all the knowledge of this 3-dimensional universe? What if at that point you are just a consciousness floating through something different entirely? And this is going to sound stupid, but like in the second Guardians of the Galaxy, he meets his dad.
Wow.
His dad.
It's got stupid real quick.
I know. His dad. You'll see where I'm going.
Okay.
His dad is like God. He's the creator of everything. The way they represent this is he was just a consciousness existing in space. And he was able to create matter, bring it into existence of his own will. So what if, as a 4-dimensional being, you become a god of your own universe,
and thus,
which you observe all of time existing at once.
And thus you could also suggest that we are just made up from one 4-dimensional creature.
Yes. That
could have been someone who has died.
Yes.
And has just created us into existence.
We could exist only in somebody else's consciousness.
Okay. Huh. Now, if we're going to talk about living in someone else's consciousness, we could also talk about are we living in a
simulation?
In the simulation theory. You have a lot of things to say about this because I don't know why it came to your attention and you thought about it way too much, in my opinion. And I got to hear about it for a long time. So let's hear about it now.
I'll give the brief of this because I could probably go on about this for a long time.
This could be an episode. Literally,
this could be a whole episode about what I think about living in a simulation. So a computer can't simulate itself, right? With 100% of its own processing power. 99.9999999 to infinity, which math, whatever, it might round up to being 100%. But 99.999% might be physically possible for a computer to simulate another computer with that much processing power. If a computer exists to have enough processing power to build a universe in which civilizations, whether or not ours is the only one, can create other computers, they must have something so incredibly advanced it can run every computer that we have right now. And we currently think of our computers as being top notch, as good as they can get, even like quantum computers.
These don't compare to that.
They are not even comparable. Like a penguin might as well think about astrophysics. It's not even existing on the same scale or order of magnitude. So if there is a computer and a civilization with the power to run multiple simulations, for every one real universe, they might be able to run 99 simulations. So that gives us a 99 out of 100 chance of existing in a simulation.
Whenever I hear about anything like this, it seems to be, it's so probable that it is true, but also seems to be so improbable that it is at that point nothing to worry about. Yeah. Because even if we did prove it, what would that accomplish? There's also this theory that the universe changes its meaning once we figure it out. Could that possibly happen, do you think?
Maybe.
If we were to figure it out, because the person running this, I would assume it is there for we're here for their pleasure, to watch us develop, maybe even for some sort of research to see how other civilizations would react to things, or how older ones would, maybe. But if we were to figure it out, would they destroy the universe at that point, and then everything would just end? Or would they could they change our ways of thinking, thus bringing that idea just out of our head, just completely out, and there's another meaning to the universe, so to speak, you know? What do you...
I don't know. Because my thought is, like, to run a simulation, I would think would have to be computer-based. Yeah. It's running some kind of code.
Of course.
So if we're able to generate our own code with the same power as a code that can generate a whole universe, I think that's a sign that we're not in a simulation. If we can make a computer advanced enough to run a universe as complex as ours, that tells me we're not in a simulation. Because if we're running on a computer that has the processing power to make ours, and then we can make one that can make another, that can't physically happen, because a computer can't simulate itself, like I've said. Yeah. But then I think what's interesting is once you get into higher levels of dimension, we talked about the fourth dimension, which is there's different ideas of what a dimension is, where they say one-dimensional space is existing at a point, two-dimensional space, 2 degrees of location, 3 degrees of location, 4 degrees of location. So 4 degrees of location would be XYZ time. Right. But then beyond this, things get kind of hazy, where 5, so fourth dimensional would be your universe, all of it happening at once. Okay. 6 dimensions of this universe would be a parallel universe to yours. 7 dimensions would be all parallel universes existing with the same starting conditions, branching out to infinity. Beyond that, all possible starting conditions for universes. Right? So perhaps we exist on one computer that gave a set of what physics is. There might be another computer that has a different set of what physics is. So if we're able to understand everything about our universe, they just change a number. Things change then. Right. But like you said, even if we did figure it out, what does it change? We can't break out of our simulation.
Would it do you think it could plunge the world into some sort of anarchy? Knowing that we aren't truly real, and that essentially nothing has consequences, because in the end we either just die or we're just like we would, I think, view it as one views GTA, Grand Theft Auto video game, is that we're in a world with no consequence whatsoever. Yes. Do you think that could plunge a world into anarchy?
I think that right now we live in a world with no consequence. Because at this point in time, the only consequence that we could have is like a religious belief that your next life depends on this one. Right. Where you could have the same idea about living in a simulation of a universe. But who's to say that a simulation of a universe it's just as real as a real universe all on its own. Mm-hmm. Where when we die, perhaps we're transferred to some other life, mm-hmm. or that's it. That's all that exists. So right now, we die. We don't know what happens. We're transferred to another life, or that's it. It's all that exists. Really, either way, I don't think there's really consequences to what we do now, other mm-hmm. than what consequences can happen to you directly during your time in your life.
Right.
Like you get sent to prison. Mm-hmm. So for a simulation, why would it change?
Okay.
I don't think the rules change that greatly.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
That's a tough one, because when you put it like that, it makes a little bit of sense, I could say. Mm-hmm. But as we view things in our monkey brains, I feel like there would be some sort of change in a social dynamic if we were to figure out that we are in a simulation. Mm-hmm. Nothing would be the same. I couldn't walk around every day and act, the same towards people, knowing that, hey, I am just code. I am not a real human being.
Why do you feel real now?
Why do my consciousness, so to speak, and then I think that
your consciousness would still exist in the same way.
That's very true.
Just the way that consciousness is made mm-hmm. is the only thing that's changed.
Right. The only thing I could think of is that anything it could change is that whole first idea of thinking of this as sort of a video game, so to speak. Uh-huh. Just because how we conceptualize that as its own small world, no mm-hmm. consequence and that kind of thing. If we figure out we're in that type of world for another being, does it really matter anymore? But then you say the things you're talking about, and it changes what I think.
So I feel like what you're talking about is everybody would become like an existentialist.
Essentially.
So a long time ago, a guy whose name I cannot pronounce.
Søren Kierkegaard.
Søren Kierkegaard. We'll call him
Søren Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard.
We'll call him SK.
The man himself. SK represents.
I believe it's him. He believed if the only thing that exists is this life and there's nothing beyond it, the only thing that we have is to suffer. Mm-hmm. So perhaps it's better to not be born at all.
Right.
You feel like that's how people would feel?
I feel a good amount of the population would feel that,
mm-hmm.
in a sense.
Friedrich Nietzsche, he grew up reading this guy's work mm-hmm. as an existentialist. The idea that nothing matters, maybe it's better to be never born at all.
Yeah, wasn't that the basis of his whole thinking? Like, that's what really got him thinking about this stuff?
To him, that didn't sit well.
Right.
He thought that the world is a beautiful place. There's things to do, things to experience. Mm-hmm. Even if this is all that we get, why not try to find joy in that? So what I think is optimistic nihilism, where if this is the only thing that exists, this is all we ever have, mm-hmm. wouldn't you want the only thing you ever have to be as good as it possibly can be?
I generally try to keep that philosophy in mind.
So I feel like most people understanding that we're just a simulation, there might be nothing after this, would take that philosophy of if this is the only thing that exists, this is the only thing we'll ever have, mm-hmm. make it as good as you possibly can.
I can see that. I like to think that with any sort of existentialism is, I never liked when people only think of existentialism as it is the thought of you just think everything is meaningless and whatnot. Because to me, that's not a true sense of it. It's that everything in the future is meaningless. Everything now is what matters. You're the only person that matters, and you have to do what you have to do to make things as best as they possibly can be. Mm-hmm. For each person, that might be different. Personally, for me, it would be making others happy, thus making myself happy and just keeping myself in a good sense of life. Mm-hmm. But to others, it brings up a bad thing because maybe their way of happiness is maybe hurting people or killing them or being a stockbroker. That doesn't sound like a good time. But so Kierkegaard.
SK.
I do not agree with him whatsoever. That I think it's best to be born, to experience these things. We may feel pain in the moment at the time, but I think it is outweighed by the feelings we get through life, whether it be through happiness, through love, through anything.
Mm-hmm. This, what you just said, aligns with my understanding of Friedrich Nietzsche, what his beliefs were.
Right.
Where
I'm sure he was mentioned in that book. I need to read it. By the way, the book I pulled out a book real quick to see if I could find anything. At the Existentialism Café, I would suggest that book.
His idea was all you have is you and doing what makes you happy, exploring the world, seeing everything. So you have to do what is best for you, right?
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that involves Nazis misconstruing what he thought, his beliefs, all that stuff.
Is there that documentary you sent me?
Which we'll
put it in the show notes.
Yes.
It's an extremely good one. It's his whole life, correct?
Yeah.
If you want to learn anything about Nietzsche, right there. Simple and easy to look at.
I think they do a good job explaining what he thought about things, not just like your average person's like what they think nihilism is.
Right.
So this documentary does a good job of explaining what we're talking about.
You know what I hate?
What?
Rick and Morty's way of showing nihilism.
I don't.
You don't?
And this is going to make me sound like a meme.
It's fine. No.
But
I don't like it. It's
first off, tell me what you think about it.
I think the internet itself has ruined it for me. And the pseudo-intellectuals that have come along with this show.
Yeah.
That is a big factor of what's ruined it for me.
Exactly.
But it just seems sometimes they really hit it on the ball.
Yeah.
Of like the whole reasoning and thinking behind it. But I feel like it's more miss than hit when it comes to that show.
Yeah.
Could I give an example? No, I haven't watched Rick and Morty in a while. But from what I remember, it was more miss than hit. Though there were times where it was spot on for sure.
Okay.
What do you think?
The way I think it is the main character, Rick. He doesn't care about anything that's happening in the world as everybody sees it. But from his perspective, none of it matters because he's working on a much more grand sense. He has bigger fish to fry. He's saving the entirety of the universe, not just the world.
Right.
So this planet that he's on, that he does not give a crap about, is only just a platform for him to work off of. Whatever happens to it doesn't matter to him. Where I think that he's working on something bigger. That's why it seems like he thinks that nothing matters, when really he realizes what truly matters is the entirety of everything, not just what people experience.
Okay. Rick and Morty fans are the worst. Another thing I wanted to talk about was a Facebook situation that is related to the Baader-Meinhof phenomena. And essentially what happened is Facebook is being accused of listening into our conversations. So they have a feature on their, when you're updating your status, it listens to the song or the station or whatever show you're watching, and then it puts that into the status. Like, oh, this boy is watching this. They're doing that. But what's happening recently is that people are thinking that they're constantly listening to them, and then based on conversations, advertising towards them. I don't remember, I think there's a YouTube video, and there's different stories of people talking about this and actually happening, like some guy talking about a cat, and then suddenly he has cat food advertisements and whatnot. And Facebook denies this right out, obviously. Even if it is happening, has not been confirmed whatsoever. Of course, they're going to have to deny it. And then this brought off the situation of the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, which is like when something happens to you, you notice it much more, like getting a car. When I had my Mustang, I didn't notice one Mustang on the road, ever. They just seemed to be, I saw one every once in a while. Oh, that's very cool. Mm-hmm. I got my Mustang. I see them everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like once you hear about something, then you see it everywhere. Even if it is not a prevalent thing, you see it more often, mainly because this could bring into the idea of reality is what you perceive, and then when something is brought up, you perceive it even more, but that's just how it was in its original state. But I wanted to quickly ask you about this idea of our personal electronics listening in on us, and maybe could that be used for a good thing if it maybe made your life easier, but it was constantly listening to you, which means that information could be sold to advertisers, or will be hacked and you will be listening on to, but you're sacrificing that for maybe convenience and maybe a certain AI learning about you and making your life easier, like with smart homes, with a Google Home or something like that.
I value personal security a lot. My privacy is very important to me. So in this kind of situation, although I feel like it could make it easier, there'd have to be a lot of time put into securing it. So maybe you do have like a Google Home type appliance that listens onto you all the time, is able to help you out, a smart home. What would have to happen if it uses web-based resources? I feel like it would have to be routed through multiple proxy servers to ensure your security.
Right.
Like the Tor browser, the way that works. The place it's receiving its data from, although this would slow it down, can't know who it's sending data to. I feel like and then all information would have to be stored on that physical device, not in the cloud somewhere. Because that information can be tapped into.
I personally never, and I probably never will trust the cloud. It seems like it's too comparable.
Exactly.
And to put all my, even if it's family pictures or things like that, I think if I take, let's say, a picture of something in my house or something like that, you could acquire enough to break into my house and figure out where everything else is.
Exactly.
I wouldn't want people looking at my hypothetical kids, as I have none. Or it's just, there's so many situations of the cloud, though no matter how secure it is, it has been broken into. And I could never trust that whatsoever. So I think the whole proxy thing would be the only way. But even then, I don't think I personally could get in on that.
I'd have to have a very well-grounded understanding of the security behind it, and a better understanding of how hacking into these type systems works before I'd allow it into my house.
And this reminded me of a thing where governments have tried to push towards every encrypted thing, every password protected device, to have a back door to it.
Yes.
As it is put in. I personally think that's a terrible option because you are going to get hacked.
Yeah.
This is, at this point in our life, and for the rest of humanity, as long as computers stay as they are and we don't have some sort of blackout, it is not if you're going to get hacked. It is when you're going to get hacked. So if you give this key, or you have a door with a key hole, somebody will break into that. Yeah. Even if you live in this world where the higher power will not, and they'll use it for good, there's so many other things, so many other people that are more malicious that will attack it. Do you think? But then there's the argument of, what if there's a situation where recently, I don't remember how recent this was and how the validity of this story, but I remember there was some sort of suspected terrorist who supposedly did things on his phone after they caught him, but it was password protected. He's not going to give up the password, and they literally cannot get in because Apple has made it to where if it's password protected, it's encrypted. It's unless you put in your actual password. Do you think in certain situations they should have a backdoor, or it should be all in all, nothing.
Okay, first off, I'd like to bring up a post that I saw on Reddit that was about this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And scrolling down through the comment section, someone's comment was, "Do you remember when the FBI used to investigate crimes?" Which made me laugh. And I understand that going through someone's phone is a form of investigation. But I just thought it was funny that they're like, going into this phone will give us the answers versus investigating it.
Right.
But so having a backdoor, people can hack into your phone now. Right. The FBI eventually was able, assuming that you're talking about the story that I think you're talking about,
maybe
they were able to get into this terrorist's phone.
Okay.
There was, I believe, a Saudi Arabian company that figured out how to be able to hack into this system.
Right.
Which then worked with the United States government. The thing is, if there's a back door, it's easier to get in.
Right.
There's a key that you can put in a lock and turn, and you're in. Where if there's not a lock on that door, if it's just not a way in, you have to be smart about getting in.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it more secure because it takes a very complex level of hacking to get into a device like that.
Correct.
I think it's still possible. From my understanding of it.
Everything is possible from my understanding.
Yes.
When it comes to anything with code, it can be manipulated, no matter what.
You can get into it. I just don't think it should be easy for anyone, including the government, to get into anybody's information, even if that person's a suspected criminal.
Mm-hmm. So they should have no right.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I 100% agree with that.
Back to where you started with this, about Facebook listening to you.
Okay.
There's this story that you hear sometimes. There was a man one day. He comes in. He's checking the mail. Target has sent him coupons for baby supplies. His wife's not pregnant. Must be in his daughter's name. It's for his daughter. He goes storming into Target. "You think my daughter's pregnant? Why would you think she's pregnant? She's obviously not." Target apologizes to him. He returns home. That day, he asks his daughter about it. Turns out his daughter is pregnant. He returns to the Target, apologizes. Target knew that she was pregnant before her own father living in that home did.
Right.
And it's because the things that she had purchased from Target, scented, like lotion without scent, is something that a lot of pregnant women will buy. She bought things like that, not necessarily baby diapers, but the kinds of things that pregnant women will buy.
Right.
So to me, you talk about your cat. You own a cat. You think that your device is listening to you? Maybe. You weren't looking up cat food. Maybe you were looking up just like information on cats.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, maybe you're either looking into getting a cat, you have a cat, or you just have interest in cats in general.
Right.
But from an advertiser point of view, if you looked up 10 funny cat pictures, you might have a cat.
Right.
Show you cat food. Getting information from various sources, they're probably able to figure out whether or not you have a cat. The fact that you talked about a cat and they heard it means you've been thinking about your cat.
Right.
So the things that you're looking up online, they're probably able to use to figure out you have a cat, even though you're not looking up cat food.
Mm-hmm. So it's more algorithm based, and then people think it is because of...
It's just accurate.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't... I think a lot of people realize this, but a good amount don't, is that Facebook is always watching you, regardless of if they're listening into your phone.
This is why I don't use Facebook.
Yeah, it's whatever website you go to, Facebook has tracked it, and Facebook has put it into the algorithm of who's going to advertise, who's going to be on the front page for you. And I know a lot of people do get that. But to the people that don't, that's something that needs to be understood. Why people need to be more, in a sense, technologically literate, so these type of stories don't ever come out.
Yes. Okay. There's a video called 1 Minute Time Machine. It's about a guy who has a box with a red button. He presses it. It sends him back in time 1 minute.
Yeah.
So he uses this idea to pick up a girl. So he goes to a park bench. He says something to her. See how she reacts. If she reacts negatively, he goes back in time 1 minute, does it all over again. And he keeps going until he keeps saying the right things. We'll drop this video in the show notes. Turns out this girl that he's talking to has a degree in physics and specifically time travel. So she says to him, there's a theory where every time you travel in time, you're really traveling to a parallel universe.
You're creating a parallel universe.
You're creating a parallel universe. And you in the old universe dies. I think that's interesting. If that is true,
right?
Is it still you that's going to this different universe?
I would say yes if we bring up the thought of death.
Okay.
The death of you going from one to another, because you cannot live in two worlds at once. So bringing the idea of death is saying that you are transferring yourself, which could also bring into the whole thing of breaking of consciousness.
Yes.
That idea of dying and then being in another place shows that that's happening, right? That you are transferring, and that is not not necessarily a copy of you. It is you yourself, sort of.
Based on my understanding of the way physics works, you can only travel into the future, not the past.
Right.
Because, like I said, if you were able to travel at the speed of light, time wouldn't pass for you, but you know, from a third-party observer, we know time passes, and light takes time to move. It's unappreciably quick.
Right.
But it takes time for it to happen. But something traveling at the speed of light, no time will pass for them. So if you're traveling at the speed of light, relative to you, nothing happens. Relative to something else, you might travel 1,000 years into the future.
Right. But nothing's changed for you.
Nothing's changed for you. But now, when you stop, you're 1,000 years into the future. But you can't go backwards.
Okay, because I remember you pointed out that once you're at the speed of light and nothing has changed for you, you're able to see all of time.
Well, not necessarily.
Is that, if I remember that correctly?
It's not so much that you're able to see all of time. It's just perhaps that's a possibility. Maybe
if
nothing happens. Maybe the world goes completely black until you slow down. Or maybe you see everything.
Because I was going to say, if you could see everything at once, couldn't you hypothetically see what happened before? If we're seeing all of time.
Exist at that point in time, though.
Okay, that makes
like
more
I
sense.
said, if you have a laser pointer traveling at the speed of light, no light will come out of the laser pointer. But if you have a laser pointer, you turn it on, the light comes out, and then you start traveling at the speed of light, the light will only make it perhaps a foot out of the laser pointer if that's the amount it had traveled before you started traveling at the speed of light. So that's the distance that the laser pointer will cover.
Right.
You can't make the light go back into the laser pointer because you'd have to go faster than the speed of light.
Right.
Which can't be done given our understanding of physics.
Yeah, as far as we know.
Okay.
But I feel like if you bring in the fourth dimension, there's a possibility of going faster than the speed of light. Because bringing into the fourth dimension is bringing in a whole slew of new thoughts.
I feel like
and changing. It could possibly change how we think of physics itself.
With the fourth dimension, though, I don't think you can transfer yourself from 4 to 3 dimensions.
Okay.
I think once you exist in the fourth dimension, you're stuck there. Because your person exists at all points in time.
Right.
Yeah.
He has killed himself multiple times throughout the video, but at the last jump, the girl presses the button.
Yes.
Because she tells him about this theory, and he has a mental breakdown, realizing how many people he killed. And let's just say you are transferring your consciousness, and let's not get into this. Probably not possible. If we think about it, that original guy has transferred his consciousness forward and going and kept doing it up until this point where he breaks down. Then she presses the button, killing herself and bringing her consciousness into this next world, but not the original guys. Yeah. So she has essentially broken this man down, destroyed his life, and then pressed the button again, and she died and went to a new universe. Yeah. Just thought about that real quick. Yeah. That's a funny little anecdote.
He still exists at some point in the universe where he both just had a mental breakdown and witnessed a woman's death.
Right. And there's probably a whole bunch of legal things going on as well. As why did this woman just die? Why was he the only person there? And then it's a whole universe. Issue for him. This is why the parallel universe thing is very cool. Also, I agree. The multiple universes of where she either, when she sees his death, or she either runs away or she stays there, she freaks out. It's just cool to think about how those other universes play out.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Antonio.
What's up?
You want to ask Reddit?
Let's ask Reddit. Alright, this is a little section. We like to go to Ask Reddit, find a question, and we'll answer it. We have 1 karma. Good. High five.
1 karma.
The road to 10.
What can you go on a rant about at any given time?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Any given time about a rant. You see, right now, it's being put on the spot. Yeah. Because I don't know what to talk about. If the situation came up, I could rant about some things for a long time. But then when you tell me, hey, what is that thing you could rant about? I cannot think about anything whatsoever. So I'm going to ask you then. What's your thing?
I could go on and on about our existence in a simulation.
It's very true, you can. Yeah, when this first came up, he first started reading about this, it was, what about, like a week at least of you just talking about that consistently?
Yeah.
Which wasn't bad.
I get obsessive on topics.
What? Joe obsessive? No. Can't be. What's the best way to become a bad girl?
What?
What is the best way of becoming a bad girl, Joe? You have had
I don't know. What's the worst TV show you've ever watched?
Worst TV? Oh, wow. Mulaney? Literally one of the... which is upsetting because John Mulaney is one of my favorite comedians, really, of all time. He's so talented. But then Mulaney came up, and it was just... Oh, God. It was trying to be Seinfeld, in all honesty. Sad. No good. Okay, what's the most ironic thing you've seen happen? Mine is whenever anybody preaches about how drugs and or alcohol is bad, and then you see them get plastered and faced, and then how they act real stupid about it. That is one of the most ironic things I can think of. What about you, Joe?
I could not even think of something. What trend are you glad died out?
Frosted Tips. Right away. Atrocity. Don't know why that ever became a thing. Hey, so this is actually kind of related to things we've talked about before. Okay. What's the biggest surprise for you when you got to college?
Biggest surprise for me when I got to college? Yeah. People stop caring about what everybody else thinks of them. And if they do, everybody else thinks that they're a douche.
Yeah, I kind of get that. I think for me it's the amount, I would say, of not like personal responsibility. Yeah. It's just it's such a change from going from high school to college of like, hey, you come to your class for 4 hours a week, and then you have X amount of homework to do in X amount of time. Also, missing 1 day of class is like missing half a week of school, like of high school. That was kind of like a big thing for me.
What are your goals in life by 2020?
My goal? At that point, to have a degree, or be close to finishing my degree. That's really about it. I really don't have any long-term goals, just to be close to finishing my degree or have it finished.
What's the most useful and or interesting thing Reddit's ever taught you?
Useful? Okay, interestingly useful is what to do when you win the lottery. There's a whole thread that I will send your way that is very in-depth about what to do and how to save your money and make sure that you don't yourself over.
I feel like that's not very useful.
I say it's
odds of you winning the lottery are so
find
low.
It's but
interesting. Yes, useful.
Interestingly useful, as I said.
Okay.
Because it's quite unlikely that that'll ever happen. But if it does happen, I'm ready.